Hello again, I'm Stephen Jerome, and I'm going to continue reading from my third novel, The London Year. This is part 104. I know somewhere where no one would look. I was suddenly caught up in the idea of a caper, a royal prank, because I knew the absolutely most secret place in all of London. I'd always thought that a gay bathhouse was where I'd hide if I ever killed the president. But now I had an even better place, and it was hiding in plain sight. Where? Colin said. Harrods. He looked at me like I was crazy. Harrods? In the deep freeze, Colin. I'll bet barely a dozen people in the world even know it exists. Colin went silent, thinking with his mouth agape. A deep freeze? Do you really think? What about... how do we get it? I have a friend on the loading dock. He'd do anything for me. It was a flippant disrespecting of Dermot's tender feelings, but neither Colin nor me were thinking straight, both caught suddenly up like 10-year-old amateur detectives. We'll have to act fast, Colin said at last. You're right, Gracie's going to be on top of this in no time. I followed Colin downstairs. He went straight for the phone and called Francesca. Darling, I have some very sad news, he began, and gently explained what had happened about Finn's suicide. The coroner just left with his body. There were long pauses. Colin looked at me, pointing to his eyes. Francesca was in tears. Once she gathered herself, he explained our big idea. We're going to move Finn's portrait to where no one can find it. Suddenly he pulled the receiver away from his ear. Apparently she wasn't as caught up as we were. No, he wasn't going to tell her anything more. She shouldn't be involved. There were more pauses, nods, and yes, darlings. At one point he said, Terry and I just think it's all so wrong, and yes, Terry, he's here with me. Yes, the American. Clearly, Francesca was dubious, but Colin kept emphasizing the outrage, the need for quick action. In the end, she came around, if not with enthusiasm, then a sense of duty, ready to stand by her man. The old girl had pluck, I'll say that. Then Colin called the construction foreman. He'd had to abruptly let go when he realized his financing had collapsed. The man said he'd bring a lorry over early the next evening after his new job ended and after he'd gone home for his tea. The plan was that we'd take Finn's portrait down the following night, in a little more than 24 hours. But time enough for Colin to round up cleaners, to have the landing mopped, the bathroom scrubbed down, and to round up the help we'd need to transport the panels. It would also give me time to talk with Dermot, whose cooperation would be crucial. Once the plan was decided, Colin left and I suddenly found myself alone in the flat. Never had silence been more unsettling. That lasted as long as it took to call Tess and tell her I needed to get myself up to Notting Hill as quickly as I could. As I described the scene, tears filled her eyes. It was all such a tragedy, but at the same time so chillingly dispatched. The cops, the coroner, the forms, the ambulance, whisking Finn's body away, page turned, end of story. We decided to give Gracie the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure she was as shocked and heartbroken as we were, but her alliances were totally skewed. Protecting Sebastian now was a knee-jerk response. Tess said I got off light, and it was true. I seemed to have been abruptly let go as Sebastian's personal photographer, but without any further consequences. Tess also had the good grace not to say I told you so. There was nothing left of Finn but the artwork, and as far as Colin and I were concerned, Sebastian had to pay. As for our plan, Tess made her thoughts pretty clear. Now you're stealing art? She asked, sounding utterly incredulous. Well, it's not stealing exactly. Well, I'd say it is, Terry. The portrait belongs to Sebastian. But he stole it from Finn, I insisted. I don't think the courts would see things through your moral outrage. I knew she was right. Damn voice of reason. And if pressed, she added, I don't think Sebastian would be nice about it either. And that was probably true as well. Beauty and fame may have opened doors, but skullduggery kept him in the room. He knew people. They knew people. That's how it worked. That's how he ruined Colin. Then, apropos of nothing, but really everything, Tess said, Blanche finally told me why Timothy moved to Italy. You were right. I hadn't known the details. My whole inside reacted at the mention of his name, but I just nodded, poker-faced. I had no idea if Tess knew the extent of my feelings for Timothy, but that his name came up at all suggested she'd gleaned something. I didn't mention to Blanche about the Polaroid, Tess added. Best not, I replied, and quickly changed the subject. I don't understand what Sebastian wanted with me. I don't have anything to steal. You have talent, Terry. You were useful. Count your lucky stars, that's all of you he used. If it was a power play, I'd say you won. I won because I didn't lose, I chuckled ruefully. Somehow, it doesn't feel like winning. We both chose to believe that I actually had not succumbed to Sebastian's charms. The playful sparks of sexual availability he scattered around like magic dust. Still he never gave without an expectation of return. He was the bone he tossed to everyone, we, the hungry dogs he'd been baiting since he was a pubescent teen, since he realized his face, and sometimes the promise of his body, was not just his power but his weapon. The more permission he gave his admirers, the more they wanted more. Sebastian didn't offer himself to pose as a model for Finn. He summoned Finn, gleaning his weakest spot, to feast with abandon on his physical perfection. In the end, as emaciated as Finn was, he died of gluttony, a slave to his hunger for beauty. I kept seeing him half submerged in the bloody water, pale and wan, like a modern pre-Raphaelite Ophelia. In my mind, I willed it not to be so. I'm meeting Colin after work, I said. Tess looked at me amused. You can't win, Terry. Well, at least I'm going to go through the motions. For Finn. Okay, I'll stop there. We'll continue next time. Thank you for following along.